Wow, semester's flying by already. Let's get organized here. See who's in the room. So if you completed our first review quiz, so we'll have one of those probably every fourth week. We'll have a review quiz, morning Bugra, on the 3 lessons before. So in general, the quizzes were quite well done. And I have also marked everybody's lab 1. If you submitted lab 1, you should have had it marked. You're in my hometown. So labs were good. It was kind of fun for me reading a bit more about you, learning a bit about your families and where you come from. So that was interesting. If you submitted lab 1 and don't have a mark, then there's probably a reason for that. But I believe I did mark all the submissions as far as I know. Okay, so what are we doing today? Help if I put my browser up on the right screen. So today, first of all, if anybody had any questions about the quiz, I would be happy to answer them. We're going to go over assignment 1, and then we're going to start using Express.js. So we're going to use Express in 2 ways. One is the manual version, and then we're going to use this tool called the Express generator, which works sort of similar to the project templates in Visual Studio when we're working with ASP.NET. So the generator will actually build out a working application for us that we can then start to customize. We're going to introduce and play around with HBS view templating. There's some different template engines available with Express, but we're going to work with HBS, and then we're also going to look at routing in Express as well. So just before we dive in today, were there any questions from anybody about the review quiz? I think in general, people did quite well. I didn't check the average. Okay, that's good. I could probably, let's see. Okay, that's good. I think I can actually check. So the average score, the average score was 8.96. So most people would agree with you, Raymond and Chris, and think the quiz was pretty easy. And it's sort of designed to be fairly easy, just a bit of a quick check-in to make sure that you're getting the main concepts that we're covering in the course. Go away. I don't know what I'm doing. Let's look at assignment 1. I do know what I'm doing when it comes to that. So you will find that in the assignments tab. And let's go over it. So it is going to be due after Thanksgiving. So you have 2 weeks to work on this. It's worth 15% of your grade. And what you are building is you're going to use Node and Express to build yourself a portfolio website. Does anybody in the class have a portfolio site already? Okay, that's a no, a few no's. Okay, well, all developers should have a portfolio site. Okay, not yet. Well, that's about to change over the next couple weeks. What's the value of a portfolio site? Yep, it's like an online resume. That's right, Jason. And we've heard actually, it shows off not only who you are, that's right, Cameron, it's a chance for you to showcase your work. Yep, and if you build it yourself, it also shows your skill. All of those things are true. So whenever possible, when I'm giving students large assignments, when possible, I want you to build something that's actually useful outside of the context of the course. Yeah, so that's, I think the portfolio is useful. And we've heard many times from employers before that employers have told us repeatedly they typically look for three things from students. They want to see your GitHub, so they can actually look at your projects and your code. They want to see your LinkedIn profile, and they want to see your portfolio. So probably most of you have LinkedIn profiles. I know all of you have GitHub repos that showcase your code, but what most of you don't have is this piece, the portfolio, so we're going to take care of that. And I will show you a few examples. So we're going to use Express, we're going to use the handlebars templating engine, and you are going to deploy your site to a live cloud service, the one we're going to use, which is Heroku, which was actually purchased by Salesforce. Heroku gives you free 5 web deployments. So we'll look at using Heroku maybe even later today. Okay. You must do all your own work. You can use external code in your project subject to these conditions. You must cite where the code came from. It can't be any more than 10% of your code. You must be able to explain it, and you have to get prior written consent from me via email. Okay, this is important. The last time I taught this course, I had a couple of students who found an entire online portfolio website or tutorial, downloaded the entire thing, basically put their own name on it and submitted to me as their own. Those students received academic misconduct charges and zeros on the assignment. Okay, it will be quite clear to me if you just copy this whole thing from somebody else. So I will show you a few sample portfolios from students I've gotten in the past. Give you an idea of what this might look like. Okay, this, I guess Andy finally took his site down, so I'll have to remove that link. So here is a student portfolio that I got. You will probably recognize, some of you will recognize Jess, probably a number of you have had her as an instructor. So this was the portfolio she developed when she was a student. So she's got an about section that gives a little background on who she is, what her skill set is. She's got a work section where she featured different projects. So in your portfolio, you should be showing some of the things you've built in your different classes here at Georgia. You probably have your IoT project from semester 1. You've done work in Java. You've done work in JavaScript, in ASP.NET. So you should feature some of the projects. And here was another portfolio. Envy, who is an international student, originally from Vietnam. He's now working for a local development company. So here was Envy's portfolio. Describes himself. He's got links to his GitHub and his LinkedIn profile. He's featured all his different projects, which he's actually tagged based on their technologies. And he built a working contact form here as well. So you need to have 4 pages in your portfolio: a home page, an about me, a projects, and a contact page. If you want to have other pages, that's fine. You can use other pages. So you're going to use handlebars for your view templates. We're going to do this today in class. You'll generate a new site with the Express generator. This is an NPM package that we will install. And it will build out a site structure with folders for public assets, controllers, and views. There will be separate folders for any JavaScript and CSS libraries. Recommend you use Bootstrap or another third-party theme. You will use GitHub and make regular commits to GitHub, and then you'll deploy your site to Heroku. There are some optional options here for bonus marks. Number one, you can replace the HBS template views with Angular or React on the front end, which I believe Envy did here. I think he used React for this. Number two, you can create a working contact form that will actually send an email. So I'm not going to show you how to do that, but if you figure out how to get your contact form to actually send, you'll need to go and find an NPM package to do this. Sorry, I have dogs running out in and out behind me. Puppy that's training. Then I'll give you bonus marks for that. The other thing you can do is create an external document, kind of a design document that would include wireframes, an explanation of your technologies, and a style guide that would list things like your fonts and colors. You could also run your site like Envy did, deploy it on an actual live domain. So all of those things are optional, but there are lots of opportunities for bonus marks. So there's the breakdown of the grade, a few marks for the interface design. Again, you can go find a CSS template and use it. Just cite it in your code where you found the design template. Some marks for the basic functionality, and then most of it is for the actual site structure, so that you've used the generator, you've separated your HTML and CSS, and you have a working, organized site. Couple marks for GitHub. Sorry, this should not say February 18th. This should say next week, so October 5th. We'll update that. I'll update the document. And worth 15%. So the idea is that in 2 weeks, you have a functional, professional-looking portfolio site that will tell a potential employer who you are, what are your skills, and let them see some of the work that you've done. Are there any questions from anybody about the assignment? Okay. All right, I will. Yeah, it should be, because the subject of your assignment is you. This is a marketing site, and you're the customer. Okay, 2 commits due by October 5th. So yeah, Adam, in order to get the full 4 marks, I want to see that you've started on the project and you've made at least 2 commits by next Wednesday. So that's to force you, if you want full marks, to start early and get working on it, as opposed to leaving the whole thing to work to do on the 11th or 12th, is the idea. Yeah, Cameron, you can do it, but you can do it 3 hours, but you won't get full marks. Yes, I know some people need the pressure. They can't do things early. They need the pressure of the deadline. So I will just overwrite the document here with the new version so that date is updated. Okay, so I've updated the document, so it will now reflect that those commits, at least 2 of your commits are due by next Wednesday. Okay, so if you don't make any commits until after that, you can't get full marks for the version control section of the assignment. Okay, so we've talked about the quiz, we've talked about assignment 1. If you have any other questions that come up about the assignment that crop up, then if it's during class, of course, feel free to ask. And if it's afterwards, then just send me an email. So we want to jump into using Express. So I'll just go through a little bit of an overview. So we're going to talk about what Express is. We're going to look at these view templates and how we've got a bunch of different options for different styles of view templates and which one we're going to use. And then we're also going to look later on at publishing our app to the cloud on the Heroku service. So what's Express? It's part of it's the E in the mean stack. So Express is really an add-on to Node. It's middleware that's designed to handle some of the web interactions in our Node applications. So Express actually uses Connect under the hood as a dependency. But Express is more fully featured. It sits on top of Connect, and it extends what Connect offers. So and that includes some HTML templating engines. And it also allows us to extend the response object that we come with Connect, so we can support different data formats. Like, for example, if we want to build an API, we can use Express to render a JSON response, for example. Connect doesn't include that kind of functionality. So here's an example. We could actually go and try this out if we wanted to. Maybe we will. We'll create a couple of different little projects today. We'll maybe create 2. We'll create a basic project with Express. This code, if you look, it actually looks really similar to what we did with Connect, almost identical. And then later on, we'll use the Express generator. So Express, the main objects are pretty similar to the ones that we've used before. We've got request and response, so the HTTP request from the user, the HTTP response, from the server back to the browser client. We also have this application object, which is when we're instantiating Express. Kind of like we instantiated Connect last week. We'll skip over that. Okay, we'll also talk about this a little bit later as well, the app.verb. So we'll look at the different HTTP methods and how we handle different types of HTTP requests in Express. So let's see, what are we going to do here? Okay, I'm going to open up my code editor, first of all. And I'm going to make a new project. I will call this, let's see, Lesson 4 Express Basic. So first, we're just going to try really simple Express examples. It's going to look fairly similar to what we did with Connect last week, but with a couple of minor differences. So I'm going to call my project Lesson 4-Express-Basic. So I've got an empty project here. The first thing I'm going to do is initialize Npm. So how do we do that? You would have done this in your lab 1. What do we do to initialize npm here? Thank you, Simon. We're going to run npm init. And I'm just going to hit enter at all of the prompts. Okay. So now this will generate our basic package.json file. Step 2 is we want to install Express. So we can just run npm I Express. So this is going to create a node modules folder, and it will install the npm Express package. So Express has 50 dependencies. So when we install Express, we get Express. We also get all of these other packages. Now, if we open package.json, we can see it's added Express here. Now, you'll notice something interesting. In our npm, in our package.json, it actually says the main file is called index.js. So we're going to create this file. So I'm just going to go and now create a new JavaScript file that I'll call index. So first we're going to reference the Express package. Now we want to instantiate new Express application. So I'll create a variable called app, and we just instantiate it this way. And much like with connect, the new keyword is not required. So we are creating an instance of an Express application here. Yeah. Correct, Jillian. And now we'll say when our app has a GET request at the root URL, so this looks a little bit similar to what we did with Connect, we've now got a callback and the same two parameters that we should be getting familiar with now. We've got a request and a response. So whenever there's a GET request made at the root path, we've got this callback with our request response model. So all we want to do here is send a response. We can say res.send, which is a little bit different. And we'll just send a hello world. And lastly, we want to start the Express server. So we'll call app.listen. We'll use port 3000. And then we'll just have this empty callback. It says Express running on port 3000. So this is almost identical, really, to what we did with Connect. last week, we required the connect package, we instantiated a connect application, and then we did some HTTP routing where we would send a response and we would listen for connections. So I want to try to run this. I can just use the nodemon utility. There's a few ways. There's actually 3 different commands I could use to run this, and all of them would work. So one option is I could just run nodemon. That's probably the best. So I can just run the nodemon command. My server starts. It says it's running the process. The node process is running index.js. And we get our console.log message from line 12. We get that printed out in our command prompt or our terminal. Sorry, bear with me for just a second. I'm not sure someone's... Okay, my apologies. So we're running our site with nodemon. Let's check it out. We can hit localhost 3000. And we get our hello world message. So this works very similar to the little site we built last week with Connect. So this example, we can actually see this code on the Express website, which I'll put in the chat. So at express.js.com, they've got a little, so we just sort of borrowed this sample. They've used const, and they've put the port in a variable, but really we're just doing this same sort of example for starters. Okay, so right now we've only got one route here. So only requests mapped to the root run. Everything else will give us a cannot get. Yeah, const probably is best practice, to be honest, because these things aren't changing, right? So if the value is something that is never going to change, we probably should be using const, Adam. Fair question. These aren't variables where the value is going to change. So we've got one route, but right now the only path that's mapped is our route path. So as soon as we try any other request, we have this cannot get that we saw, I think we saw last week. So what about an example where we have multiple routes? If we look at our file from last week, so we had multiple routes mapped here. We had a hello route, a goodbye route, and an index. And then we also, in index, we kind of did this 404 handling in case the user requested some other route that didn't exist. So how does this work in Express? It's a little bit different. So we've tried their hello world. You know what? We're just going to rewrite what we did last week, but this time we're going to use connect. So I'm going to rewrite this a little bit. say let hello equal so we'll put our hello world message here, but now we're wrapping it, we're assigning this to a variable, and we probably want my brackets here. So now we can change this pattern. What change should we make here? So we want any requests at /hello. If we get a request at /hello, what should we do? Yeah, exactly. We'll take out the callback. Thank you, Adam. Sorry, and this, instead of app.get, we're going to change this to app.use. Wait, I'm sorry. We have a get request. I'm going to ignore that for right now. So I'm going to restart the app this way. And now we're going to get to debug. Okay. Let's start again. Okay, so now at hello, it calls our variable and prints hello world. At our root, we have cannot get. So we're going to want an index variable in root, and we're going to want a goodbye as well. So we can set up a goodbye function. So I'll change my comment here, map URLs to the corresponding functions. So when we have a get request at goodbye, we're going to run our goodbye function. So we've got a hello and a goodbye, and then we've got our URL mapping. I'll add one more function here called index. Again, has our two callback parameters of request and response. And this one can just say home. So we have three functions like we had last week. And when we have a get request at the root, we'll call our index function. So we're mapping out each of the allowed URLs to a different function. So let's try this out. So now home, at localhost 3000, it says home. Our hello URL calls our hello function, which prints hello world. And our goodbye function prints goodbye world. Anything else? We have a cannot get. So we can see this is not identical to using connect, but it's very close. Because underneath it's actual Express is actually using connect to do this routing for us. Does anybody have any questions so far about our Express routing example? Okay. Yes, I will put this sample's basically done. I should do one more thing with it before I put it up on GitHub. Any idea, any suggestions of what should I do with this project before I push it to GitHub? Code is actually done. Thank you, Chris. So I'm going to take my .gitignore file. I'm going to copy it in here. Okay, all right, so sure, we could do that. So yeah, let's say we did it in lab 1, right? So how would this work with Express? So that's a good question, Bradley. So in lab 1, we used connect to do a me, a mom, a dad. So how would we do lab 1 with Express? Okay. So here's an example from lab 1. So we can set let me equals with request and response. I'll say I teach at Georgian College. So what would I need down here in the URL mapping? What should the URL be that loads this response? So I've set up my function. What URL should call this function? You got it. Thanks, Chris. So Bugra, Simon. So when we have a get request at /me, we call the me function. So I could go ahead and try that. NodeMon should have restarted. So now when I go to localhost 3000 /me, it calls the me function, which sends this response. So we could have, in fact, used Express for the lab. And our code would be very similar to what we see here. Yep, you got it, Bradley. That's exactly right. It's exactly how it would work. Good question. Thank you. I think it is always a good idea when we can connect different things together that we're doing. It helps provide context. So thank you for that question. Okay, so I'm going to stop this. I will push this up to Git now. So I'll initialize Git. I'll add my files. So lesson 4.1 basic Express routing. And I'll just go and create a quick Git repository here and push my code. This will be our basic Express routing. So I'll copy my remote and push this stuff. Okay, so the code we've done so far today, it's all here. So if you're a bit behind, then you've got that as a reference. So we can work with Express this way, where we just install it and manually set up our application and set up all our routes. We're actually not going to build our sites this way. We're going to use the Express generator tool instead. So let's take a couple minutes to have a look at what is the Express generator. So they've got some documentation here in the getting started. So it's an application generation tool that quickly creates an application skeleton. So there's a new command starting in node 8.2. So we used to install globally the generator and then use the Express command to build a new project with it. We've now got this command, npx, that both installs it and generates a new application globally. Now there's one important thing we'll need to talk about, which is the view templates. So you'll notice here, we've got this add EJS engine, add handlebars, add pug, and add Hogan. So there's different styles of views syntax that we can use. The default is called pug. And pug is sort of cool. It simplifies HTML, but I don't want to use it in this class for two reasons. I've used it before in this class. It's very hard to debug, number one. And number two, later in the class, we're going to rebuild the front end of our application using Angular. Now, handlebars syntax is very similar to Angular. So for that reason, we are going to use this option when we create our applications code. We're going to use this HBS option for handlebars support. So that way, when we go to change from handlebars to Angular in our front end, the syntax is not wildly different. They're quite similar. So when we use this tool, when we use the generator, the project that we build is going to look something like this. It will build a folder for the project. It automatically adds the package.json, so we don't have to run npm in it. It'll create app.js, which is like the global configuration file. We'll have a public folder, and inside there we'll have JavaScripts and images. We'll have roots, which I'm going to rename. The roots are basically like the controllers, because this uses the MVC pattern. We'll have a style sheet folder and default CSS file. And then we'll have views and a couple of views. We'll have a default homepage as well as a layout template. And then a bin folder that contains the compiled JavaScript code. So quite a bit like creating a new web application project, an MVC project in Visual Studio. It doesn't give us quite as much as Visual Studio does, but it's the same kind of idea. And then we'll install all the dependencies listed in package.json. And then we can just go to localhost 3000 in our browser, and there will be a working, very simple, but there will be a working website that actually loads. And then we can take that site and we can start to customize it and build what we want out of it. So we can do things like add a navigation bar, we can add Bootstrap, and then we can add new routes of our own. So that's what we're going to do next. Okay, I'll put the link here to the generator documentation. I'll just throw it in the chat. So it is 11:49. So let's take a 10-minute break here. And when we come back, we're going to try out this tool. We will also need to do one thing together, have a little conversation before we try out the generator tool. Okay, so let's take a break. We'll come back in 10 minutes. All the code we did from the first hour of class is already on GitHub if you need to reference it. We will be back shortly.